Thank you, Liz. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's presentation, the Registered Aquatic Export Facility 2.0. Dr. Alicia Marston will be on in just a minute. She's giving the presentation today, but she asked me to introduce myself because I'm a new member of the aquatic trade team, and I will be your point of contact for RAEF 2.0 from here on out. Alicia's done a lot of hard work and so much of the heavy lifting with this program over the years, and she'll still be closely involved, but I will be the point of contact for you all. And my contact info will be included at the end of this presentation. So I really look forward to working with you. I've met some of you in the past as an import-export VMO, or even our paths may have crossed when I was a field vet. So I'm new to this aquatic trade role, but I'm not new to aquaculture. And again, I'm really looking forward to working with y'all. So Alicia, it's all you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Liz. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today on RAEF 2.0. The plan is to go over an overview of the changes that are coming and what to expect, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, all right, so we'll start out with just some introductions about the registration program, talk a little bit about the timeline and the new processes that we have in place, talk a little bit more detail about the actual inspection types, and then a couple of closing things at the end. So as Lauren mentioned, I'm really excited to share that our aquatic trade team has grown. We had our first staff meeting today as a full team, which is really exciting. So myself as the director, we also have Shaquita Whiting, who's our program analyst, and supporting all of aquatic trade. And then Dr. Lauren Harris, who you just heard from, she's covering aquatic animal exports and is also the RAEF program manager. And then just last week, we had Dr. Siobhan Leonard start with us, and she is our staff officer covering aquatic animal imports. So I'm excited to have our full team together, and you'll be seeing more from all of us. All right, so let's talk about the timeline and process. So I wanted to take a minute here at the beginning just to kind of talk about why do we have the RAEF program. So RAEF stands for the APHIS Registered Aquaculture Export Facility Inspection Program. And it's basically our mechanism, APHIS's mechanism, for conducting inspections of aquatic animal export facilities, which is required for some trading partners. So this RAEF program is our mechanism to be able for APHIS to say that a facility is under APHIS oversight, which is required on a lot of the export health certificates, as well as a mechanism for us to document and verify that a facility is meeting the country-specific requirements. So, as many of you know, we've had a changing landscape in aquatic animal health and trade over at least the last 2 decades, if not longer. And so with that has come growing international awareness and guidance that's been developed, such as new pathogens have been listed by the World Organization for Animal Health. WOA has also come out with an aquatic animal health strategy, which is sort of a global plan for aquatic animal health and includes trade. We've also seen initiatives on antimicrobial use and antimicrobial resistance. So there's just a lot of kind of global initiatives that are ongoing. In addition to WOA, we also have the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization that has put out their guidelines for sustainable aquaculture, which includes things about biosecurity and stuff like that, as well as antimicrobial use and resistance. We've also seen a lot of technological advancements. So now, where we were maybe several years ago, where we had aquaculture in very specific pockets around the country, we now have facilities, that are either present or prevalent in most U.S. states. And so with all of that, with that changing landscape globally, as well as our changing landscape domestically, and we also need to make sure that we're updating this mechanism, RAEF, to be able to meet and maintain our international market access, to meet those certification needs that are changing, as well as to stand up to any audits or evaluations that our trading partners do come to the U.S. and do of our systems. If the U.S. APHIS were to not pass an audit or not have a favorable score on an audit from a trading partner, that could put our entire export market to that country or region in jeopardy. So all of these things are what we're taking into account when we're developing and updating the RAEF program, and making sure that we're hitting those targets along the way, but that we're doing it in the most efficient and painless process as possible. So that's kind of why we have it. Now I want to talk a little bit about the timeline. So the program initially started around 2008. It was just a one-page inspection form with no country-specific requirements, and how that inspection was being conducted wasn't consistent across the country. It was very, very dependent on the inspector. So in 2020, we did a big update to the registration program. We had a 3-part form. We also were very diligent about making sure that we were documenting and verifying country-specific requirements, and looking to kind of improve the consistency of the inspection and approval process overall. So now come to 2023, and we have RAEF 2.0. So with this update, where we have pre-inspection forms and inspection checklists, we'll go through those in more detail. Those are part of our streamlining the documentation and verification process of country-specific requirements. And then also I'll share a little bit more later about how, with our process improvements under RAEF 2.0, we're really trying to leverage the areas of expertise within our agency to make the inspection and approval process run smoother. And the last thing I have here is kind of a placeholder for CAP. So for those of you that have heard about CAP, it's our Comprehensive Aquaculture Health Program Standards. This is not a trade program. This is a program that our domestic aquaculture staff are working on. And I put it here as a placeholder because while they have several years to go to be able to codify that into our regulations, it is potentially a mechanism that we can use in the future to be able to check that box of APHIS has oversight of an export facility. So we're working really closely with our domestic staff as they're developing the CAP program to make sure that, as they're developing it, it will also meet trade needs, so that we won't have duplication of programs and that kind of stuff. So I just leave it as a placeholder for now. And for right now, we will focus on RAEF 2.0. All right, so we had 3 primary objectives with updating RAEF 2.0. The first one was making sure that we were meeting trading partners' requirements for that oversight by the competent authority. So correcting any consistency and compliance issues around, what are the export requirements? How do I meet the testing requirements? Health certification process, things like that. We also wanted to, under this objective, correct efficiency issues. So looking at the gaps or misunderstandings that we have in the process, making sure we clarify those, having a more formal process for premises freedom evaluations, having a better guidance on complex export requirements and how to document those and meet those requirements. And then also the last one here is third-party facilities. So for some of our transshippers, making sure that we had a mechanism so that they could continue to do what they, their business model while also meeting that destination country's requirements. Our second objective was to engage our stakeholders. So that this has been almost a year-long process. We started at the beginning of this year with hosting informational sessions from both internal and external stakeholders to just kind of socialize the proposed changes that we were coming up with for RAEF 2.0 so that we could really make sure that we were listening to, all of the areas that maybe could use some improvement. Then for the last couple of months, we've been doing a whole host of trainings. So we have some virtual trainings, some in-person trainings, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. But making sure that, once we had all of the RAEF 2.0 program finalized, that we were doing the proper training prior to the actual rollout of RAEF 2.0. And then our last objective was to update our resources, making sure that we were updating our documents and processes so that they were clear, that they were streamlined as far as the steps. And then also we created a website. And so the website's not live yet. It will be live prior to the implementation date, so in the next week or so. But the goal of the webpage was also to increase the transparency of what this inspection and approval process looks like, as well as to improve the efficiency and streamline the process for the annual renewals and approvals that facilities go through each year. And then lastly, with our resources, all of the virtual trainings that we've had, we've been recording, such as this one, so that we can also use it later for any new staff that come on board or as refreshers for current staff, etc. So those were our three primary objectives as we were looking to update RAEF. Now for the timeline, so we started our training of stakeholders in July. So I've been traveling around the country the last 2 months, doing in-person trainings for our field veterinarians that conduct these inspections. We've been in Florida, Washington, California, Arkansas, and we have our last in-person training in Pennsylvania next week. In addition to the in-person trainings, we've also have a host of virtual trainings. So we did our first overview of RAEF 2.0 for our internal stakeholders at the beginning of August. Then we have this call today for our external stakeholders, and then we'll have another webinar next week on September 12th, where we'll go a little bit more in detail, specifically into the premises freedom evaluation package. That the primary target audience for that webinar is accredited veterinarians, but it's also open to anyone else that would like to join. But we'll just go a little bit deeper and talk a little bit more about the nuances of that particular package and process. So all of that will be all of our trainings will be wrapped up by the end of next week. And then as of September 18th, RAEF 2.0 will be live. So that means that for any facilities that are inspected on or after September 18th, that it will be they'll be conducted using the RAEF 2.0 documents and processes. And then the last thing I have here on our timeline is we do want to do a larger, more in-depth training for our field staff. And we just did not have the bandwidth to be able to do this rollout and a large training at the same time. So we have some tentative dates scheduled for early next year in 2024, and that will be a more in-depth training for our field staff that are conducting any kind of aquaculture inspection, including the registration program. All right. So first, I want to talk a little bit more and highlight some of our new processes. So this decision tree will be on our website, and this is kind of the first step for anybody that is looking to either become a RAEF facility or even if you're renewing your approval. So the first question here is, does the destination country require a RAEF facility inspection? If the answer to that question is yes, then the next step is deciding which of the facility types best meet your business needs. We'll go into the details about the facility types in a few minutes, but there's the production facility and the reboxing relabeling facility. If you're a production facility, there's then an additional step depending on the type of testing that you have to meet for that particular country. So if you have to meet premises freedom, there's some additional steps that you'll need to do for the premises freedom portion of the production facility approval. And we'll go through each type in just a minute with some more detail. So let's say you're exporting to a country that doesn't require facility registration, APHIS oversight, and they don't require any premises freedom level testing. In that case, your facility does not need to be RAEF approved for that country. This is something that we want to really emphasize because we recognize that the process for becoming RAEF approved is both costly in financially and time, resources, and also can sometimes hold up. We don't want to unnecessarily hold up your ability to export to that country if you don't actually need RAEF approval to export to that country. So that's why I mentioned that here. If the country you're going to doesn't require RAEF but does require premises freedom, then you will still need to be RAEF approved because the premises freedom approval process just requires that extra level of APHIS oversight. So this is sort of the initial decision tree of, where am I going? Where do I start? And we'll talk a little bit more about the details in a minute. One of the other new processes that I mentioned is our website. So this will have information, step-by-step guides, that decision tree, flow chart, about the registration program, as well as resources on, export testing, our premises freedom definition, how to meet that, as well as, which labs to use and things like that. So all of that information, instead of kind of being in a sub page, we've developed just an aquatic export web page where you'll have all of that information easily available. And again, that should be going live in the next week or so. So then we also have these workflows that we put together for each of the different facility types. And we'll go through these workflows in more detail as it pertains to each facility. But what I want to highlight here is you'll see that there's 4 different colors. So each of the colors represents a different participant in this process. So the boxes in white is the facility. Those in blue are our APHIS export veterinarians. The ones in red are our APHIS field veterinarians. And then the boxes in purple are our headquarters aquatic trade staff. So in general, for each type of facility, there will be a workflow like this that says, this is the facility does this, then it comes to the export VMO. They do this, then they send it to the field veterinarian that does this. And so it kind of spells all of that out in one area, in one location, so that you can have a good idea of planning as far as, why do I need to maybe start my documentation so far in advance of my inspection? Well, it's because we need to do these few steps before we can do the inspection, that kind of thing. So again, we'll talk about this in more detail, but the reason that we wanted to have these workflows is one, to make the process more transparent to everyone, and two, to really focus on the expertise of all of these different players. So our export veterinarians, their bread and butter is understanding the export requirements to send an animal to a certain country, the process for
it.
I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. And so, hey Liz, are you able to?
Yeah, I'm going to try and mute everyone. If somebody is not on mute, they should be. I will go through and try and see who that is.
Great, thank you. So like I was saying, so for our export veterinarians, their area of expertise are the export requirements and that process. For our field veterinarians, their area of expertise is in conducting facility inspections and that process. And then for our trade staff, for Dr. Harris, it's making sure that we're maintaining our internal documentation for both our internal stakeholders as well as anything that we would need for our trading partners. So with that, I'll go on to our next slide. So just to kind of recap what we just covered. So the changes that we're making with RAEF 2.0, they're needed because we need to meet this changing landscape of aquatic animal health and trade, as well as trading partner requirements. We have a lot of trainings that we've built in various different modalities throughout this whole rollout process. And we really focused on making sure that we were streamlining our processes to determine if registration is required, and then if it is, making sure that our documents are publicly available, that we have transparent workflows, and that those workflows are really leveraging the areas of expertise within our agency. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit more about the specific inspection types. So there are 3 different types of, and the type of facility inspection that a given facility will select will be based on both their business and market needs. So the first one is just a RAEF production facility by itself. The second one is for RAEF production facilities that also need to meet premises freedom in order to export. And the third type is our facilities that are doing reboxing, relabeling. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what each one of those means in more detail. So for our RAEF production facilities, this type of approval is for an exporting facility that either breeds, produces, grows, packages live aquatic animals on the premises prior to international export. In this case, the facility would be going to a country that requires RAEF, and that destination country could either have no testing requirements or test and ship. Now, the second type of approval is for, again, our production facilities that breed, produce, grow, or package live aquatic animals, but with the addition of the fact that they have to meet premises freedom for at least one of the countries that they're exporting to. And so the primary thing here is that they have to meet the premises freedom requirement to export, and then the country may or may not also require RAEF oversight of the facility. Then our third type is the reboxing relabeling facility. So this is specifically for those facilities that are receiving live aquatic animals from suppliers that they are then reboxing, so changing the outer packaging materials, or relabeling prior to shipping internationally. Sometimes they're referred to, sometimes these businesses are referred to as transshippers. in some cases, folks may have animals on site that they are exporting, but then, for certain customers, they receive, specialty animals from a supplier, which they're combining into a shipment and exporting, that kind of thing. So it basically is for those facilities that are receiving animals from a supplier, and they have to maintain a certain level of health prior to exporting. All right, and so these would be for facilities that are exporting to countries that require RAEF, and that could have any level of testing, either no testing, all test and ship, premises freedom. Okay, now I want to go a little bit more into depth about the production facility approval. So this is the workflow. So at one of the first steps is the determining the inspection type. So this is the facility will look at where do they want to go, and what are the requirements to go there, and if they need to meet, if they need to be RAEF approved, then they will fill out the pre-inspection package for the RAEF production facility. Once they fill out that pre-inspection package, they send it to our export veterinarian at their local office, who will review the pre-inspection documents. The export veterinarian will complete the first part of the inspection checklist, which is basically verifying, does the pre-inspection documents have like the correct health certificates, and are the species eligible for export to that country? Is the testing required, captured correctly, that kind of thing. So primarily, like, what are the export requirements, and verifying that we've captured them correctly. Then the export veterinarian will send the inspection checklist and pre-inspection package to the field veterinarian, who will schedule the inspection and come out and conduct the inspection and complete the second part of the inspection checklist. The checklist will then be sent by the field veterinarian back to the export veterinarian for just a second look and counter signature. And then all of the inspection documents will be sent by the export veterinarian to Dr. Lauren Harris and our aquatic trade staff for final review, and for us to then update our internal tracking of facility status. Right now, we're using the RAEF master spreadsheet, which has every facility, what species they're approved for, to which countries, that kind of thing. Once the final review is complete at the staff level, Dr. Harris will let the export veterinarian know, and then the export veterinarian will send that final approval letter to the facility. So that's the workflow for just the production facility approval without premises freedom. So as we mentioned, going through that, you'll see that we have the pre-inspection package, which includes 2 different forms and an Excel workbook. I'll show those in just a second. Then there's the inspection checklist itself. Part 1 is completed by the export veterinarian. Part 2 is completed by the field veterinarian. And then we have a standard approval letter template that will be used to issue the approval letter to the facility. So I'm going to just pull up the pre-inspection package here, and this is a working draft. So it's not perfectly polished yet, but the polished version will be posted on our website soon. So basically, for the pre-inspection package, this first page is general information. It talks about the type of approval, what's required, and then what to do once you've completed this pre-inspection package. There's 2 parts to the form. The first one is just general information about the facility, the company, the RAEF approval number, the address, contact person at the facility, accredited veterinarian information. And then just some statements that the facility contact person will attest to, that they understand what this type of approval is for, and that they're authorized to represent this facility, and that they'll be present during the inspection, during the on-site inspection. So that's Form 1. Again, all of these will be posted on our website, so you guys can all go and look at them in more detail. Then Form 2 of the pre-inspection package is focused on the actual animals and countries that you're exporting to. So there's just some general information here, approval number, and the address of the facility. And then the facility will complete one of 3 Excel workbooks. The reason we have 3 is that one is specifically for premises freedom, which we'll get to in a second with the second type of approval. And then we have 2 for just the regular production facility approval. And it's based on the number of species that are being exported. It's just a slightly different format, but the information that we're capturing is exactly the same. So I'll show you that. Let me just pull that up. All right. So this is, I'll make this bigger. This is the Excel workbook for facilities that are exporting to countries that either require test and ship or no testing, and they're sending 15 species or less. So there are 5 steps, and the facility will fill this out for every country and species that they're seeking approval for. Now, for each Excel workbook, there's an instructions and examples tab, and I really encourage you to use this while you're filling out this document. So at the top, this tab, there's each step is listed here on the left, and then there are instructions for how to complete that section, as well as additional details and examples. So for example, the first step is, what country are you going to? And so for the most part, you're going to have a different row in the spreadsheet for every country that you're exporting to, and then a different row for every species to that country. Now, there are some cases where the export requirements, say to France, may be exactly the same as Germany, because they're using the same EU health certificate, and both of those countries have the same health status. So in that case, instead of having to, list that out multiple times, you can combine them into one row. So that's kind of what these instructions are trying to explain. And then there's also some examples about how you would complete that. Another one is step 2 is, what is the title of the certificate and where is it sourced from? So I'll show you that in a second, but that's important information for us to document exactly what country-specific requirements we're verifying. The third step is, what are the common and scientific names for facilities that are exporting, especially ornamentals. There's some information here about how we can approve at the genus level, but sort of what that means. As well as, some of the descriptors that we don't want on the list for your registration approval. So for example, it may be important for your inventory to identify, the female, you have one code for female clownfish and another for male. But for our purposes, we don't want those descriptors in there because we're just approving the clownfish in and of itself. So it's just kind of one example, but there's a variety of just kind of descriptions and details. So take a look at this. Then down below, we've completed the table using these examples. So for example, for this first one, we have both Belgium and Germany, and they're both using the EU health certificate, which is, this is the name of the health certificate at the top, and then this is the link to it on our IREGS page. The reason that we need the name of the health certificate is that APHIS uses that when we're creating your approval letter. There are some countries that maybe only have one, like Mexico has one health certificate for any type of aquatic animal. But Canada, for example, has maybe 5 or 6, depending on the end use that you're going to, and the requirements vary between those certificates. So it's important for us to capture that information both on the pre-inspection package as well as in your approval letter. Step 3 is the common and scientific name. Step 4 is whether or not any testing is required. And if it is, then that would be where you would put the pathogens of concern in step 5. So you'll see for this example for Belgium and Germany, for clownfish, there's no testing required, and so step 5 is not applicable. When I scroll down here to this third example from Mexico, they're sending koi on the export health certificate posted on the IREGs for Mexico. Testing is required, and these are the 3 pathogens of concern. So just so that you can see the difference between how you would capture it when there are diseases of concern versus not. So that's the instructions and examples tab, and then that will help you to be able to fill out these rows in the pre-inspection document. Now, we do anticipate that this is a new document. It will take a little while to fill it out the first time. But the hope is that then you can use this information from year to year. So next year, once you filled it out the first year, the second year you're re-inspected, it's really just coming back, verifying that the information is the same. Is the health certificate the same? Has the testing changed at all? And then resubmitting it for the second year. All right, so that's if there's 15 species or less, and there's no scientific basis on the 15 species. It's really just we needed a cutoff. And so the second version, the second Excel workbook type is for 16 species or more. And I'll just show you this one quickly so you can see the difference. So again, there's an instructions and examples tab at the beginning. And instead of putting a separate row for each country, we actually have a separate tab for each country. We're still collecting the same information. What country are you going to? What country are you going to? Title of the health certificate. Where is it? The link to the health certificate, and if any testing is required. But for especially our ornamental folks that send more than 16 species, some send thousands or are approved for thousands. The common and scientific name and information about testing is consolidated into one table here, just to make it a little bit easier to kind of copy and paste all of that information in there for the common and scientific name versus having to do separate rows per country. Again, like I mentioned, there's instructions and examples here, and you'll see that here's an example for Belgium and Germany. Looks very similar to before, but all of the common and scientific names are down here below. And then if there's any testing, it would be indicated here. So for Belgium and Germany, none of these species require testing, whereas example 3 here for Mexico, you'll see that, none of these species require testing, but koi does. And so you would just list the pathogens here. That's kind of the primary difference. It's capturing the same information, but just in slightly different formats, just to make the process easier when you have more than one species. Okay, so that's the production facility pre-inspection package. Then that Excel workbook, as well as the forms that we looked at earlier, all of those would then go to the export veterinarian to start the inspection checklist process and onward as we described in the workflow. Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about the production facility approval plus premises freedom. So everything that we described with the production facility, with the pre-inspection checklist, the pre-inspection package, the inspection checklist, all of that is going to stay the same. The primary difference are that for the pre-inspection package, the facility is going to complete the premises freedom Excel workbook. I'll show you that in a second. And also there will be the accredited veterinarian will be responsible for completing the premises freedom evaluation package. And that package, that's what we'll talk about in more detail on Tuesday on September 12th. But that package is basically going through exactly the requirements for premises freedom, the pathogens of concern, and that is then submitted to our export veterinarians for us to issue a premises freedom letter. So those are the two primary differences, but you'll see, again, here's the workflow specifically for this. And I want to go into a little bit more detail about the Excel workbook for this one. So again, we have the RAEF production facility pre-inspection package, those two forms. And part of form 2 is the Excel workbook. Now for premises freedom, we will use this Excel workbook. So this one is just for facilities that are going to countries that require or allow for premises freedom. The primary difference is you'll see that instead of 5 steps, we have 6. So the first one is the same, is this, what country are you going to? What's the title of the health certificate? What's the address, the website web address for where it's posted on the IREGs, common name, scientific name, whether or not any testing is required. And then step 5 is talking about, if testing is required, does the destination country require test and ship to go there? Or step 6 is premises freedom required. So again, with the other workbooks and this one as well, we have the instructions and examples tab. And then down here, we have some examples already filled out. So I'm going to use this third example down here to kind of illustrate how this would be completed. So for this hypothetical facility, they're exporting to Mexico. They're using the Mexico health certificate that's on our IREG, and they're sending Vaname and Monodon. So the requirements for Vaname and Monodon are slightly different. Mexico requires testing for both of these species. For Monodon, they require testing for tora, yellowhead, white spot, and infectious myonecrosis. Mexico will allow for either test and ship or premises freedom. So this hypothetical facility already has, premises freedom for tora, yellowhead, white spot, and infectious myonecrosis. So they're going to meet the requirements for Mexico for Monodon via premises freedom for these 4 pathogens. Now, this hypothetical facility also has premises freedom for those 4 pathogens for Vaname. But Mexico requires testing of Penaeus notavirus as well. And so this particular facility doesn't have prem freedom for that pathogen. So that's why they've indicated they'll do test and ship for PVNV, and then they'll meet the other pathogen testing requirements via premises freedom. So that's just kind of you can see that there's a test and ship column and a premises freedom column. For Germany and Spain up here, they're using the EU certificate for Vaname, and the EU requires premises freedom. You can't do test and ship. So that's why there's nothing in column H here for test and ship, and just the pathogens are listed under premises freedom. There's a couple of reasons that we're organizing it this way and capturing this type of information. One is that we want to make sure that it's clear to both our export veterinarians that are endorsing health certificates, as well as our facilities and accredited veterinarians that are preparing to be able to send to these countries, exactly what the testing requirements are and what level of testing is required. So that's one reason that we're capturing this information this way. Another is that once this pre-inspection package comes to the export veterinarian, they're going to see, okay, so for Vaname, this facility is saying that they have to meet, that they're going to meet Prem Freedom for Tora, Yellowhead, White Spot, and IMNB. So then the export veterinarian is going to pull up the premises freedom letter that was issued based on the premises freedom evaluation package we received from the accredited vet of that facility and say, okay, yep, for Vaname, they meet Prem Freedom for these 4 pathogens. Good to go. So that's kind of the process and why we set things up in this particular way. Again, we anticipate it will take a little bit of time to fill this out the first time, and we're here to help you guys with that. But hopefully once it's been completed once, it'll really just be on an annual basis, just checking in to make sure the requirements haven't changed at all. Okay, so that's the pre-inspection package for the production facility. The inspection checklist is the same. And then there's the premises freedom evaluation package. So I'm not going to go into this one in too much detail, just because we're going to have a separate webinar on Tuesday about it. But basically, the package has some general information about the facility, and then a lot of specifics about what needs to be done to meet premises freedom and what type of premises freedom does the facility need. And so that's what this whole kind of first couple of pages are. And I'm purposely scrolling quickly because we'll go into these, in much more detail. After sort of the details of how to meet premises freedom and all the criteria for doing that, the next section of this package is specifically listing which pathogens and for which species the facility is saying that they meet premises freedom. So that's what the second part is. And then the third part focuses on biosecurity and the critical control points, making sure that after you've done all of this testing to meet premises freedom, that you have good biosecurity in place and critical control points in place to make sure that you're maintaining that health status on your facility throughout the year, throughout the 2 years, and onward. Because even if you were to do a bunch of testing, but then you have big gaps in biosecurity, the testing becomes meaningless because you're not actually maintaining that health status. So that's the third part to this Prem Freedom evaluation package. And we have 5 different control points for each of the 5 pathways of introduction: animals, water, feed, vectors, and fomites. So we'll go into this in much more detail on Tuesday. But basically, for the premises freedom evaluation package, as I mentioned, the accredited vet is responsible for filling that out for the facility in consultation with the aquatic animal health team of the facility. But the signature is of the accredited veterinarian on that package. And then lastly, for this facility type, we have template letters for both so a facility that is approved under this type will have their RAEF production facility approval letter, and then they'll also have their premises freedom letter. And they support each other. So the premises freedom letter will specifically say that the facility is meeting, premises freedom for this species for these pathogens. And then the RAEF production facility approval will say this facility is meeting the export requirements for this certificate to this country for these species. So they'll go together, and the premises freedom letter will act as documentation for that the testing requirements for premises freedom have been met when you're submitting a health certificate. Okay, so then the last facility type is our reboxing relabeling facility type. So there's also a pre-inspection package that's completed by the facility. Then it's submitted to our export VMOs. They complete the first part. They review everything. There isn't a part one to the inspection checklist. So the export VMO will review it and then send it to the field veterinarian to complete the inspection, work with the facility, schedule the inspection, and then complete the inspection checklist. All of those documents get sent back to the export veterinarian for initial review. Then all of the inspection documents are sent to Dr. Harris at our aquatic trade staff for final review and to update our internal tracking system. And then she will notify the export veterinarian that facility's all good to go, and the export veterinarian will send the approval letter directly to the facility. So the process is very similar, but the requirements for this type of approval are different. So I just want to look at that a little bit. So again, we have a pre-inspection package. There's two parts to it and an Excel workbook, a different Excel workbook. Then we have the inspection checklist and then we have an approval letter template for this type of approval as well. So for the pre-inspection package, forms, let me just pull this up real quick. Here we go. All right, so similar layout. The first page is general information about this type of facility approval, clarifying what reboxing and relabeling means. Also, the process for export certificate under this type of approval. And so that's the first page here, first two pages, sorry. Then the first part of the form is, again, just capturing general facility information, as well as statements that the facility will sign, understanding the type of approval, how they maintain compliance with this approval, that there's various documentation that has to be maintained for this type of approval, and that they're authorized and will be present during the inspection, et cetera. So similar, but the process is slightly different. So, or the type of approval is slightly different. So with the production facility, the animals are being produced or are being raised or packaged on that facility. And so with the production facility approval, the accredited veterinarian has direct knowledge of those animals, and so can therefore issue health certificates because of their direct knowledge of that facility. Now, in the reboxing relabeling facility, those animals are coming in from suppliers, and so the accredited veterinarian that's going to be issuing the export health certificate may not have direct knowledge of the health status of those animals coming from those suppliers. So the purpose of this type of approval is to make sure that we're having sort of that chain of custody and maintaining that health status from the supplier all the way through the reboxing relabeling facility onto the destination country. So the second part of this form is again capturing what species to which countries, similar to the production facility, but how we're capturing that information is slightly different. So let me pull up that spreadsheet. Okay. So for this spreadsheet, instead we'll have the rows based on the suppliers. So in this case, we have an example, and this is bigger, sorry. In this case, this Reboxing relabeling facility is seeking approval to export these species to these countries. So, for example, they want to send goldfish to China. So the Reboxing relabeling facility is indicating that their supplier, Fish House, is approved to export goldfish to China. So in that case, the Reboxing relabeling facility can source their goldfish from the supplier. They will have to they'll be packaged at the supplier. They'll come to the Reboxing relabeling facility. They can change the outer packaging, but they're not changing anything with the interior packaging. So we're maintaining that health status of those animals. Maybe they need to be tested for, KHV or something like that. All of that testing would be done beforehand at the supplier. And then they're just repackaged, the outer packaging or the box is relabeled, and then they're exported with a health certificate that's issued by the accredited veterinarian of the Reboxing relabeling facility. So this is the type of information we're capturing on the Excel workbook instead of, what testing is required and what are you doing at the facility like we did with the production facility approval. Instead, we're focusing on making sure that the Reboxing relabeling facility is receiving animals from approved suppliers for the approved species to the approved country. That's the primary difference with this pre-inspection package compared to the other one we looked at. Okay. All right, so those are our 3 different types of approvals. That was the bulk of what we needed to go over today. So again, we have 3 different facility types. We have the production facility approval, we have production facility plus premises freedom, and then we have the Reboxing relabeling facility. All of these inspection documents, so the pre-inspection package plus the Excel workbook that we looked at, the inspection checklist, all of those will be posted on our new website so that you can easily go and look at them, whether you are pulling them up to complete them or you want to know, I have an inspection coming up soon. I want to look at the inspection checklist to make sure I know what what the veterinarian is going to ask for, that kind of stuff. All of that will be posted on our website. And as well as I mentioned, like a step-by-step process for how those inspections and approvals will be done, the workflows, etc. All right, so then I wanted to capture a few other additional pieces of information. So one thing I wanted to touch on is our updated user fee guidance. So APHIS collects user fees for both export health certificates that are endorsed by APHIS, as well as the facility inspection and approval. So for our export health certificate endorsement, any facility that is RAEF approved and meets premises freedom, then they will only have to meet the baseline certificate endorsement fee, like we've been doing in the past. Now, for those, and the reason for that is that we're doing all of that premises freedom evaluation package beforehand. We're issuing the premises freedom letter. So then when it comes time to endorsing an export health certificate for a facility that's going to a country that requires prem freedom, all of that review and sort of documentation has been done beforehand. So we don't need to charge to review those test results. Now, for facilities that are exporting to countries that require test and ship, or that allow for test and ship instead of premises freedom, then we won't be doing those premises freedom evaluation packages beforehand. So instead, the certificate endorsement fee will be based on the number of tests and the type of pre-export testing. So if they're doing test and ship and they have to meet test and ship for 4 pathogens, then the certificate endorsement fee is based off of those 4 pathogens instead of the base rate. Now, additionally, there's the hourly rate for the facility inspection. And I just wanted to highlight here that that hourly rate includes both the review of the inspection documents by the export veterinarian and the field veterinarian, as well as travel for the field veterinarian to and from your facility and the time to conduct the site inspection. That's not really changing, but I just wanted to make sure that I was highlighting that under the user fee section so that everybody had that information. The second thing that I wanted to highlight here are the current upcoming trainings. So again, as I mentioned, we'll have another virtual webinar on Tuesday, September 12th, where we'll go much more in depth into the premises freedom evaluation package. The target audience for that is especially accredited veterinarians, but everybody's welcome to attend and listen in. And then we will have, we're wrapping up. We have our last in-person training for this summer will be next week. And then we'll have the larger training in 2024 for our field veterinarians conducting aquaculture facility inspections. So we'll have that additional training in 2024. And then we're talking about, how can we make sure that we're having regularly scheduled trainings moving forward as either refreshers for our current inspectors or for our new field folks that come on board at a later date. And if you weren't able to make today's webinar, or if you're not able to make the webinar on Tuesday about premises freedom, we are recording both of these, and that recording will be available too. So if I know I received a few messages from some of our accredited veterinarians that couldn't make it, but please just feel free to email Lauren and ask for a copy of the recording once they're available. Give us a few days after each of the presentations, and we're happy to share that with folks. All right, so that is the end of our presentation for today. Thank you guys for sitting through all of that information. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you have a better idea of the plan moving forward and the updates that will be going into effect on September 18th. Also, I really encourage, we'll be sure to let everybody know once the website is live so that you can go in there and look at these documents in more detail and these processes. Lauren and I are available if you have any questions, as well as your local export offices. And we're happy to help. The last thing that I wanted to mention before we take any questions is that, we've had a lot of, whether it's this update to RAEF 2.0, whether we've had changes in export requirements to certain countries, there's been a lot that we've been messaging, and we really want to make sure that we have the contact information for the right folks. So if you're interested in receiving any email updates from our aquatic trade staff, whether it's import related, export related, RAEF related, please shoot an email to our program analyst, Shaquita Whiting, just so that we can make sure that we have your correct contact information. In some cases, we maybe have one contact person for a given facility, but maybe there's multiple folks at your organization that want to be in the loop. So we just want to make sure we have everybody and we're not missing anybody. Additionally, for our accredited vets or for our diagnostic labs that may want to receive these kinds of updates, please feel free to send us an email, and we'll make sure to get you on that list for future mailings. And with that, I will take any questions that we have.
So we do have a bunch of questions in the chat. The first one is, more or less, how long will the process take before we get the final approval from start to finish?
So as you saw with, that's a great question. As you saw with the workflows, there are several parties involved in the approval process. We highly recommend that if you're a facility and you are going to be renewing your RAEF approval, or you're a new facility interested in becoming RAEF approved, that you contact your local export office at least 3 months in advance. I think that it will take a little bit of time just to complete the pre-inspection documents. You may have some questions, just kind of, the first time that we're doing any sort of process, there's always some kinks that take a little bit of time. So the pre-inspection package will be directly posted on our website, so you can go straight to that, fill it out, and send it. But we recommend that you send that a couple of months in advance. That will give us enough time to make sure that we're reviewing it, and that the export veterinarians reviewing it, completing their part of the inspection checklist before the field veterinarian actually comes out to conduct the site inspection. Now, one of the things that we did with this streamlined process is we removed a lot of the document review to before the actual site inspection. So hopefully what that will do is that once it requires the facility to contact APHIS further in advance of their expiration date, but then once the field veterinarians come out to do the site inspection, the time that it will take to just finalize those documents and get it uploaded into our internal tracking system will be much less. So the hope is like 3 to 4 months from start to finish, and hopefully once the facility's been through this once, that process will be shortened, because all of that extra kind of back and forth at the beginning hopefully won't be needed with the pre-inspection documents and that kind of thing. So that's the goal. It's, I think we would all like for it to be shorter than that, but just with all of the different folks that are involved and need to be involved in this process, that's part of why it inevitably takes longer than maybe we would like.
So the next question is there a mechanism in place for adding a new destination country between the annual renewals, such as, what if a producer is approached by a new customer in a new country that was not on the list when the pre-inspection paperwork was done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there, I think how to phrase this. So the first question that we want to ask is, if you want to add a new country, let's say you got a new customer in Korea, and so you want to be able to export to Korea. The first question that we need to look at is registration actually required to go to that country? So if registration is not required, then you don't have to go through that whole process to add that country to your approval. But let's say that it is required, then the process would be simply just updating the Excel spreadsheet for the pre-inspection package. So we would just want to, so you would just, add another row to the pre-inspection package that you had submitted earlier when you had renewed or submitted your documents for approval, and you would just add a new row for the new country and the new species here, and then resubmit that to your export veterinarian at your local office. Now, it's up to the export veterinarian, the field veterinarian, to determine whether or not, just based on the previous inspection that we did, if we can just add that country to your approval. So let's say, you were already approved for Germany and you want to add another EU member country that has the same exact requirements. There's no reason for APHIS to come back out and re-inspect your facility when we wouldn't be really looking at anything different than we had during the first inspection. In that case, we can just add that to your approval. It will still need to, that will still need to be documented in this Excel spreadsheet. It will still need to be communicated up to Dr. Harris so that we can update our internal tracking system. But that's how we would add a new facility to your existing approval. Now, let's say you wanted to add a country that had totally different requirements than what we had inspected you under. Then APHIS may need to come out and do another site inspection. So there's always that possibility. But usually if the requirements are fairly similar to what we've already inspected the last, within less than a year of when we were just out at your facility, then we can add that country to the approval. One of the things that will hopefully streamline the process under RAEF 2.0 is that instead of having under the previous RAEF 1.0, the inspector had to fill out a new form for every country that you were seeking approval for. Now it's just adding a row to this spreadsheet, making sure that the export requirements are the same. Are correct. Sorry, and then just submitting that up. So hopefully we've decreased the paperwork burden on that process so that we can have a more streamlined process for adding countries in between your annual inspection. Great question.
The next question is, if you're not intending on exporting the species of concern that requires additional testing to a specific country, does it change the inspection type the facility will be required to do?
That's a good question. So let's say you're exporting an ornamental species to the EU and they don't require any testing. The question, it all comes down to whether or not that destination country requires RAEF approval, requires the exporting facility to be under the oversight of APHIS. If the answer to that question is yes, like it is with the European Union, then even though, that clownfish doesn't require any export testing, to go to the EU member countries, it has to be from an aquatic animal facility that has been inspected under RAEF. Now, let's say that you wanted to send that same clownfish or an ornamental species to a different country that didn't require any testing and also didn't require RAEF, then there's no reason for you to go through the process to be RAEF approved for that species to that country, and it will, it saves you time and money to not be approved, and you can go ahead and export to that country as long as you can meet all the requirements on the health certificate.
Okay, the next question is it acceptable to add a new country during the renewal process?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. In the premises freedom Excel, the last column can only be filled based on the existing premises freedom letter of specific pathogens. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I know, let me just pull up that spreadsheet real quick, and I think I know what's being asked. So on this premises freedom Excel workbook, part of the pre-inspection package, under step 6 is what pathogens have to meet premises freedom. So there's a multi-step process to completing this, and that's why here I'm just here so it's easier to see. So the first step is that to determine what actually has to be done, what actually is required for the destination country. So in this case, Mexico for monodon requires testing for these 4 pathogens. Now, these 4 pathogens, you can do either, the facility can say, I want to do test and ship for these 4 pathogens to go to Mexico, in which case you put that information here under step 5 for test and ship. Or the facility can say, hey, I already have premises freedom for these 4 pathogens for monodon, so I'm going to use that existing premises freedom status to meet the export requirements of Mexico. That's how the facility will fill out this form. And then when this Excel workbook and the pre-inspection package comes to the export veterinarian, what they're going to do is they're going to verify, okay, they want to go to Mexico, they have the right health certificate, they have, this species is eligible for export. They've indicated that, yep, Mexico requires testing. These are the pathogens of concern, these 4 pathogens for monodon to go to Mexico. So they've got the correct pathogens. And then, for Mexico saying, okay, they're going to meet premises freedom for these 4 pathogens. The way you're going to verify that premises freedom, that your facility has premises freedom, is by looking at the premises freedom letter that has been issued. And so that premises freedom letter that's issued by APHIS will be based on the premises freedom evaluation package that your accredited veterinarian is filling out and attesting to for pathogens of concern. So it's a multi-step process. Definitely, if you're a facility filling this out and let's say you want to go to an EU member country, and they only allow for premises freedom, you want to make sure that prior to submitting your documents that you have premises freedom for those pathogens of concern, so that you will be eligible to export to an EU member country in this example. I hope that helps, but let me know if there's any follow-up questions to that explanation.
The next question is, so the fee for endorsing a health certificate of 1 pathogen will be different than a health certificate for 2 pathogens?
Yes. So our I just need some water. So for the way that our user fee guidance is set up it's for all live animals, is that the cost for certificate endorsement is based on the number of test results that the export veterinarian has to review at the time of endorsement. So I use the example of, for premises freedom, APHIS has already done all that work to work with your accredited veterinarian to establish that your facility meets premises freedom. So then by the time the certificate is coming into the local office for APHIS endorsement, we don't have to do those extra steps of making sure, like, did they test the right pathogen? Is it at the right type of laboratory? Did they do the right type of pooling? All that kind of stuff, because all of that has been addressed beforehand. So that's why for facilities that meet premises freedom, it's just the base certificate fee. Now, for live animals that have additional testing, they're doing test and ship, including aquatics, if they're doing test and ship, then we need to review those test results. APHIS needs to review those test results at the time of endorsement, because maybe they're not being tested until 30 days prior to export, but your annual inspection was 6 months ago. So part of the certificate endorsement process is that we will review those test results. Let's say we'll stay with the shrimp example, you're exporting Vaname, and they have to be tested within 30 days for IHHNV and white spot. In that case, the test results would have to accompany the health certificate at the time of endorsement, and the export veterinarian would be looking at those test results and verifying, okay, they tested at the correct type of laboratory for the correct pathogens, and with negative results. So that extra time that it takes to review those test results at the time of endorsement is why there's a different fee for those certificates. I don't have the exact breakdown in front of me. I think that it goes in batches. So like for 1 to 2 tests, it's the same endorsement fee. For 3 to 5, it's the same. And then maybe over 5. That's something that we can make available to everybody afterwards, those exact, because I don't issue those numbers, so I don't know those exact costs off the top of my head. But that's kind of how our user fees are broken down for all of live animals that require testing.
Great. So we have 2 more questions. The first one is, how do you define a population in a single species, single water source, zebrafish, municipal water, recirculating water filtration and sterilization system facility with parallel tanks, rack system, effluent collected in water filtration sterilization system for recycling with 10% waste per day?
Okay. So I think that the reason for this question is that on our premises freedom evaluation package, we talk about determining premises freedom based on a single population. And so that we'll definitely go into this in more detail during the premises freedom call on Tuesday, but let me just pull up our definition real quick that we have on our website. This is on our existing website, but will also be on the new one as well. Putting the link to it there in the chat. Now, move it over here. So our premises freedom, our APHIS premises freedom definition is posted on our website, and I just put the link in the chat. There's some information at the beginning here, authority definitions, but under the steps to establishing premises freedom, the first part is, talking about whether or not you need prem freedom. The second one is the type of lab and the sampling, biosecurity. And then number 4 is identify the number of distinct populations that exist on the premises. So most facilities have a single population because there's maybe a shared water source or shared equipment, or there's shared personnel, that kind of thing. So if a facility is looking to maintain or obtain premises freedom, most likely they have a single population on the facility. There are a few cases where it may be advantageous to have more than one population on a given premises. So, for example, in like a research setting where you have some animals that are in one room that's its entire own system and biosecure, and should you have an outbreak in that room, it wouldn't impact, any of the other systems that you have within a facility. Or for some of our facilities that have like a broodstock population and then their grow out production separate, those potentially could be two separate populations. And really the benefit to those particular models to having more than one population is that if there were to be a detection in, say, like the grow out population, but not in the broodstock, we could maintain the health status of the broodstock for the purposes of export. So that we wanted to make sure that there's, we don't want to limit facilities if they genuinely have several distinct populations that have, all of its own biosecurity and, testing and all of that within that population, then we can certify that population. But I think for most of our exporters and most of our aquaculture facilities, just the nature of how the facility is set up leans more towards the entire premises as being a single population. If you have specific questions about, your specific facility and how that would work, we're more than happy to help talk to you more about that offline. Please just, send Lauren and I an email, and we can have a more in-depth discussion about your particular facility and, your water and critical control points and that kind of thing. Good question.
Next question is, do you have an estimated date of when CAPS will be used for these inspections and approvals?
The short answer is no. So our CAPS program is in the codification process. So they're working on taking the program and writing it into federal regulation. That's going to take probably a couple of years. And then once that is a codified regulation, regulated in our regulations, then we can start looking at using CAPS to be that mechanism to meet APHIS oversight of facilities. I honestly don't have enough